Hi, I'm John. This is my show, A Sports Reckoning. So I wanted to make this little rebuttal video to Dustin's video about him having an addiction. And he's grew up with an addictive personality. And then you hear the shit he says, and it's like, oh my God, dude. It's like, you're like sheltered little child. You fucking never really had any problems. I don't know. It's just hilarious. It's like one of these things, like, right, he's going to say something about having to go out the house to play basketball. And it's like, well, he's probably an only child. I don't know his story and shit, right? But he just sounds like, from all the kids I knew, there would be kids that were like only children. And maybe they just lived with their mother, and their mother was like, or maybe they even had a father, but there was kind of thing where the father never did anything. That the mother was the like disciplinarian. Sometimes those words are hard to get out, shit, right? So, it's kind of one of those things where the mom was the boss and shit, right? And then she only had one child and shit, right? So she wouldn't let him do anything and shit, right? I had friends like that and shit, right? I had all kinds of friends. I had the whole gamut and shit, right? I had them all and shit, right? But so the friends like that, they couldn't come out with us and play. Like us, like me and my friends and shit, we were always outside. That was one of those things as growing up, like back in the day, because I can tell you where it changed is when the major change is when they came in with the home video game system. That's the thing that changed it all. Because that's still before, like, cable gets really popular and the shows and you have all this television to choose from. It's still before television is dominating and stuff, right? The first thing that got people stuck in their homes and stuff where they had something to do was the home video game system, right? But I had come from the culture of playing in the arcades, okay? Like I said, I was always out and shit, right? I was in the arcades, and we would take our bikes, we'd go across town and shit. We'd go across 2 towns and shit. We'd go far, man. I can't even tell you, like, the journeys and the missions, the places we would go on our bikes when we were kids. We were out there doing all kinds of shit. My parents, it would be mainly my mother, except when I'd have stepfathers and shit. It's like my dad was around, but he was like a weekend dad and shit, right? So he had nothing to say and shit. We did whatever the fuck we wanted when I was kids. I had my brother, and then my brother, I had a sister and shit too. I had 2 sisters and brother, but mainly my brother. We used to do a bunch of shit. And we had the same friends and shit too. We had a lot of the same friends and shit, me and my brother, and we all had the same friends and shit. But so we were just out. We were always outside, always doing shit. We never would be inside, right? And so it's one of the big differences. It's like what you probably is like, he probably didn't have like siblings to play with. He didn't have neighborhood friends to play with. And even if he did have friends in the neighborhood, he couldn't go outside and play with them because his mother was too protective and shit, right? It's just like, oh my God. So it's like him trying to give advice about addictive personality or, addiction and actual like real world scenarios of what takes place and shit. Dude, this is like the worst guy to give any kind of advice about that.
But I wanted to offer somewhat of a context to the story yesterday, some additional context, because I think it also might be able to help others that are in the situation or could be in the situation in the future. I think that I've always had somewhat of an addictive type personality in the sense that when I was a kid, I remember just when dealing with stress, it was always sports. It was always, going outside to shoot hoops. I could shoot hoops for hours outside to get my mind off of things or just to kind of clear my head or whatever. I don't want to say that I was a good...
Right, so he had so much stress and shit, right? Stress for a kid like this was his mom wouldn't let him watch the show he wanted. He couldn't watch the cartoons that he wanted because his mom wanted to watch her show, right? And he's like, I'm so stressed out. I got so much stress. I can't watch my cartoons. Or he's like, God damn it, where's my Fruit Loops? Mom, you forgot to buy my Fruit Loops. I'm going to be stressed out all day if I don't get my Fruit Loops. Right, so, like, he'd be like, he said it's like sports and shit, right? And it's like, I don't know, you just don't sound to me like a dude who had friends who were out playing sports all the time, like, because that's what I did. It was combinations. We were just doing all kinds of shit. All I know is we were outside of the house and fucking causing havoc. We were doing whatever the fuck we wanted. We were fucking wild, rambunctious kids, and it's like our parents didn't care about us. As long as we were home at night, as long as they knew that we made it back home at night and shit, then that was like the only rule when you were a kid. You had to like go home when the street lights came on, when it got dark and shit, right? Then you had to go home. That was like your only rule and shit. And then it'd get dark and the street lights come on, and then we'd play hide and seek, because then you'd be like on your street, right? Because the difference, we'd be out journeying, we'd be all kinds of different stuff. But then when it got nighttime and stuff, we could still go out and hang out and do stuff if we were on the street, you know? So we would do things like we'd play hide and seek and shit, and then we'd play like ding dong ditch 'em. Like if you people don't, ding dong ditch 'em is you go and ring people's doorbells, and then you take off and run and shit. So ding dong ditch 'em. We would do that shit. We're terrorizing our own street. We're terrorizing everybody. But like talking about playing sports and shit, right? Because see, this is the thing with like Dustin. My friends, we were wild. We were little ruffian kids and shit, right? So there was a game I remember we used to play. Like I said, we would do all kinds of shit, right? And you just stupid shit. It's like, because this game, you could play in somebody's front yard with their front lawn and shit. This game, you could play in your front lawn. It's one of these things, too. It's like, I don't even, who figured out, how'd this name even come about? Okay, so it's like one of those things like, this was a kid's game. But now in our modern society, I'm afraid to even tell you what the name of the I'm afraid to tell you what this name of the game was that we used to play because of the woke culture stuff, right? It's not appropriate and shit for me to even mention to you what the name of this game was, right? But I'm gonna say it, okay? So the name of the game we would play is this one game that we would play called Smear the Queer, right? And so it's like one of those things. It's like, did you guys play? It could be like a regional thing that maybe you people played this game, but maybe because I grew up in the LA suburbs and shit, right? So in LA, we called this game Smear the Queer. But maybe you guys played this game in other places and stuff, and maybe you called it just a different name and stuff. It's one of those things that I don't know. It's like could have been just regional. But so we play Smear the Queer. So what Smear the Queer was is you would throw a football up in the air, and somebody get the football, and then the other people, it didn't matter if there was 3 other people or 5 people or 10, it didn't matter how many people there were, kids, because there was a lot of kids around and shit, right? So the one person would get the football, and he'd try and run, and then the other people, whoever many of the other kids there were, they just go get him. They go get him and smear his ass and shit, right? Because they actually you're smearing him into the grass and shit, right? It's like, but Smear the Queer, I don't know how that name, it's like one of those things. How did that name even come up? It's like one of those funny things. Did any of you people out there play that game by that name and shit, right? So it was one of these things that's like, so we would have our normal friends, and then there'd be other kids that you would see that were more protected. They couldn't come out of the house. They couldn't play. Like, we were all day, until it got dark, we were out playing and shit, right? Every bit of chance we could, that's what we would do. We're always out playing. The only time we came home is to get something to eat, usually. Or if you're on the block, you use the bathroom. But besides that, you're out doing shit, right? And you're men and shit, right? So we don't really need a toilet because we can just piss anywhere and shit, right? So, and then like we'd go over to the school, there'd be water fountains and shit, right? And or if we needed water, if we were out wild and shit, we'd just go up to somebody's house and turn their hose on and get a drink out of it and shit or something, you know? So I mean, that's just the way it was. We'd be out. Plus there's always places out there, like I could tell you, like, if you guys watch the movie, The Karate Kid, when he goes to the place where it's the place where they go golfing, and it's the place where they got the water slide, right? He takes the girl there on the date, and it's got the water slide, and they're playing the arcade, and they're playing miniature golf, and they're doing the little Indy cars and shit. Okay, so that place is called Golf and Stuff. That place is in Downey. That's where I grew up. But so it's right next to, a lot of people wouldn't understand what the riverbed system is. Like, it's a thing like, so when you're a kid, you always use the riverbeds to ride your bike because they're like bike trails. What the riverbed system is, it's called like the LA River system. So when they have all the floods and all the rains in LA, all the water drains into the drain things, and then it goes into the riverbed, and then you have like, so there's this big piece of concrete. It's big. The riverbed's pretty big. And so when it rains, that gets full of water, and then all that water rushes back out to the ocean. They just dump it back into the ocean. It's one of those things that they talk about, like the droughts and stuff. It's like, well, of course you guys got a drought. You don't have water because all the water you get, you send it right back to the riverbed. You send it right back to the ocean. You don't save that water. What the fuck? You're supposed to be saving that water. They got plenty of water out there, but they send it right back to the ocean. But so the riverbed system, we're always in the riverbed system, riding our bikes and shit, right? So, and one of the places was Golf and Stuff. Golf and Stuff was right off of the riverbed. Actually, like, there was some kids got murdered right at that spot, right on the road that's like Firestone Boulevard. And so right under the bridge there where the riverbed's at, and then Golf and Stuff is right on top there. That's where Golf and Stuff at. So there's like 3 kids got their throats slit, 3 or 4 kids. A couple, I don't know if all of them died, but I know a couple of them died. And so that was like right there. And so like I went over there because I had heard about that murder happening and shit. So I went over there the next day. And there was just black paint. They threw black paint all over the concrete because I guess there was so much blood there and shit, right? And then I went up because I had heard the story that one of the people had a slit throat, and then one person climbed up out of the riverbed and walked into that golf and stuff, into that place where I'm telling you where the Karate Kid's at. Okay, so the person walked over to golf and stuff and couldn't talk, but the person, this is the story that they said, and they said he was pointing back like over at the riverbed, and then, you know, and they went over to the riverbed, found the other kids all dead and shit, right? So that happened one time over there and shit, right? Okay, but right when you would climb out of the riverbed, there was a field, whatever, a little farm. It was small. It was big, but small compared to what you would think of a big farm. It was small, but it was a strawberry patch, right? So we'd go to like golf and stuff. And if we didn't have enough money to get food and stuff, if we needed something to eat, we just jump the fence into the strawberry patch and be chowing down on fucking big fat strawberries and shit. I mean, that's the kind of shit that when you're a kid, there's always something out there that you can use and shit to your benefit. So that's shit we would do. That was like my golf and stuff thing with the story and shit. But so, get back to the Smear the Queer. There's one time where we're playing Smear the Queer, and this one kid that's like a kid that would remind me of like a Dustin kid, right? And like I can remember back then, that kid had he had a Star Wars collection of the toys and shit, right? He had a nice collection of Star Wars toys and shit, right? That was one thing I remember, because that was way back then and shit. So like those toys, I'm sure, like now if you've got them, those are valuable toys and shit. I remember he had some nice Star Wars toys and shit, right? But so that's the kind of thing, it's like, he wasn't out and shit with us all the time. He lived by us. We all knew who he was, but he wasn't like one of the pack and shit. So one day though, he comes out, he's playing with us, and we're going to play Smear the Queer, right? And it's like, we were rough. So, and it's one of those things that when you're a kid, you don't understand that you can actually be rough and physical. You don't understand like how dangerous the things you're doing can actually be. And so the kid's going to play Smear the Queer with us and shit. And so he gets the ball. We throw it up one time and he gets it. So we go after him and shit. And we broke his fucking leg. Shit. It's like one of those things, it's like, you don't come play with us and shit, you get hurt. You get hurt because we were just rough. That's the way it was and shit. So when you're rough and stuff, it's like, you don't, I don't know, we didn't hurt each other like that. I don't know, it's just like, we're used to getting hit and we know how to fall. There's something about it. I don't know exactly how, but when I think back, it's like maybe we just knew how to fall because we were always falling down and you knew how to hit people, and once you took the hit, you knew how to roll with it and shit. There's something that protected us from getting hurt, because the first time the fucking kid, the dorky kid like Dustin comes over and plays with us, boom, he gets his leg broken and shit, right? Because that wasn't happening to us. We weren't breaking our legs all the time and shit. We might get some scrapes and shit, or get a little sprained ankle or wrist or something, but it wasn't, we usually weren't breaking bones. So that was other reasons why we'd be breaking bones and shit, right? So thought I'd tell you that story, then I'll tell you this other one little story here.
Complete lone wolf, but I was also okay just hanging out with myself, just playing basketball by myself, shooting hoops, or whatever it might be. But I always got heavy into things, and I collected cards as a kid and comics. I was so excited about that particular thing, and then I would move on to something else. When I was a senior in high school, the one time where it kind of bit me, I'll explain here, is I started smoking. I tried smoking cigarettes when I was a senior in high school.
Okay, so he goes on to say that he kept smoking into his 20s, and he was smoking 10 to 12 cigarettes a day. And it's like one of those things to say, to know that you're smoking like 10 to 12 cigarettes a day. That's like, because he would know. When he's saying, I'd smoke, so that means he was counting. Okay, I've had 6 cigarettes today. Okay, I've had 7 cigarettes today. He's not just a smoker and shit, right? So it's like, so he's talking about his addictive personality. He's always in high school, he started smoking, and he got so bad he started smoking 10 to 12 cigarettes a day and shit, right? And it's like, dude, I started smoking cigarettes when I was 6. There's this funny ass fucking story. And now, like, I wasn't always a smoker and shit, but I did start smoking cigarettes when I was 6, because at that time, so my mom, we had a stepdad at that time, and so my mom was married, I had a stepdad, and we had moved into this new house and shit, right? So it was a pretty nice little house and shit, and so then my mom and dad, they would go to work and shit, right? And we were supposed to go to school and shit, right? So there was me and my brother, one sister, then there was the older sister, but she was like older enough that she wasn't like part of our group because we were the younger kids, and she seemed more like a parent and shit. Like she would send us to our room, because that's like, when I'm trying to explain it, that's exactly the way it was. Like when I say she was more like a parent, because she would send me into my room, go to your room. Like, I don't know if you remember that. It's like you start doing some shit, your parents will send you to your room and shit, right? Go to your room and shit, right? And then so my older sister would send us to our room and shit. She had like kind of authority and shit like that, right? So there was the younger, me, my brother, and sister. So my stepdad smoked, and then so we started like stealing his cigarettes, because he'd buy like a carton of cigarettes, and so we started like stealing some of them and shit, right? I can remember, like, because like I said, I was young, and at that time I had count. I remember smoking one day as a kid, as a 6-year-old. I remember smoking 7 cigarettes. That was like, I remember smoking 7 cigarettes one day, because usually it'd probably be just like 2 or 3 cigarettes and shit, but I remember one day I smoked 7 cigarettes. That's a lot for a 6-year-old and shit, right? Just to even be like, how did we even get them? I mean, I know we were stealing them from him. How did he not know we were stealing them? Because had to be quite a bit. But so then, it was that time I was 6 years old, because I know I was in the 1st grade, and then this one thing happened and shit. So we were in that house, and then so I don't know why we started doing this. I know we were smoking, and we were wild kids and shit. And then for some reason, we start ditching school. I don't know why we started doing this and shit, right? And so my mom and dad would go to work, and we would leave, like we'd go to school, we'd wait till they went to work, and we'd just come back home instead of going to school. And then so me and my brother and sister, we were doing this, and we'd be sitting around, messing around all day and shit. And so we were doing this for a long period of time. When I think back upon it now, I can't remember because it's so long ago, because I think it was a month or 2 months. It was a long time, but it had to be at least 2 weeks. I can't remember how long it was, but it was a long enough period of time that all of us were missing school. And then so one day we're sitting around, like I said, I'm 6 years old and shit, right? We're sitting at the dining room table, and we're playing poker, and we're all smoking cigarettes. Me, my brother, and my sister, right? We ditched school, we're sitting at the table, we're playing poker, and we're smoking cigarettes. This is the scene of this actually happened. So we're sitting there all smoking cigarettes, playing poker, and then there's a knock on the door, right? And so it's one of those things, I'm glad I put the cigarette down. I didn't take it with me, you know? It's like, because I don't know, but I know I put the cigarette down. So I go over to the door, I answer the door, and it's the principal of the school. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Are you sick? What's going on?" And I'm just like, "Oh, I don't know. He goes, "Get dressed and get to school." He tells me, "Get dressed and get to school," right? And so we did. We got dressed, all 3 of us. We got dressed and went to school and shit, right? Because the principal came over and told us we had to go to school. So we go to school. And at that time, my stepdad, he was beating us with a belt and shit. We would get whipped and shit, right? We were getting whipped and shit, which when I think back upon it now, I actually think the whipping was getting a little bit of that discipline. It was actually a good thing at that young age. I wouldn't have wanted it to continue and shit as I got older, but at that young age, because, man, we were crazy. So, yeah, I deserved some whippings here and there and shit, right? And so we used to get whipped and shit, right? So we do anything bad, we know we're getting spanked and shit, right? Even stupid little shit would get spanked for stupid shit. That kind of stuff I didn't like and stuff, but whatever and shit, right? But so we're ditching school and shit for all this time. The principal comes over, so we go to school. We come home, and we're just like, oh, man, we're in so much trouble. We're like, man, when our stepdad gets home and shit, we're going to get whipped bad. So me and my brother and sister, we all started putting on, like, every pair of underwear we had, and we started putting on, like, 4 or 5 pairs of shorts and, like, 3 pairs of pants. We were putting on all the padding and shit. We were all padding up because we all knew we were going to get whipped bad with the belt and shit. We were in trouble, right? And then the night just went through and nothing happened and shit. So my mom never told him and shit, right? That was one of those things that's like, whoo, whoo. You know, it's one of those things that's like, all right, Mom, that was cool and shit, right? So it's like one of those things that's like, just nothing happened and shit, right? We went to school, you know, we went back to school and just like nothing happened and shit, right? We didn't get whipped. We didn't get punished for it. Nobody talked about it. It was just like a thing. Nobody ever spoke about it again, and it just kind of like never happened and shit, right? Oh, but saying? And then, so I think that's when I stopped smoking and shit at that time. I think that when I was a kid, so I stopped smoking cigarettes at that time, you know, and then I didn't start smoking, which I started smoking weed when I was 13 and shit, when I got older and shit, right? But then I did smoke cigarettes again when I started, like when I was like 22, 23, I started smoking cigarettes again, and I smoked for like 10 years, but it was like a pack a day. I can tell you one funny story. There was a guy I worked with, this old guy, when I worked at the casino. And he's like, yeah, I used to smoke. Because this is the kind of thing, like where Dustin's talking about smoking and shit, and he's talking about addiction. But it's like, dude, you don't have the stories. You don't know, like, real addiction. So, like, this is, like, the story I would say to emphasize, like, a smoker's addiction. Because this is, like, the word, when he said this, it's like, damn, right? Okay, now that's a dude who smokes a lot, who smokes. And so the guy, I was working with him, and he says, yeah, I used to smoke. And this is what he told me. He says, yeah, I used to smoke 4 packs a day. I'd only use 1 match. Shit, I love that fucking. He says, yeah, I'd smoke 4 packs a day, only 1 match. Because so that means that, you know, when you get to the end of your cigarette, instead of putting it out and shit, right, and then relighting another one, he'd just pull out another cigarette and relight that off of the cigarette that he had. He'd just relight another one and just keep smoking. So like that saying, yeah, I smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day. I only used 1 match. Oh, fuck, right? Now, that's like when you know, okay, now that's addiction. That's what we're talking about, like somebody who smoked, who was a smoker, who was a hardcore and shit, right? The real shit. That's what you got to be talking to. And shit's like Dustin, he doesn't talk, and that's the other thing, is like, I'm part of the culture, so that's why, like, the guy knew he could say that joke to me, because he knew that I would understand it, I would really understand it and shit, right? So that's what it is, when you're part of that culture, people talk to you in a different way, and they tell you these insights and stuff, and you learn all these things and stuff, right? But that's the thing where, like, Dustin, he's not part of that group, he's not part of the same culture, like, of which I grew up in, and that's why he's having a hard time understanding that I'm the one here with the big story. I'm the one here with the story that has to be told. I'm the one here with the story that could provide financial benefits to everybody in the sports card community, that Michael Jackson's actually the love child of Diana Ross and Smokey Robinson. And a piece of shit loser like this, Dustin, he would instantly just say, that's not true. And it's like, yeah, because you're a fucking piece of shit little fucking mama's boy bitch. You don't know anything about anything. You think you had addiction, you had a problem with cigarettes because you were smoking 10 cigarettes a day when you're fucking 20 years old? Come on, that's your fucking addiction story? What a fucking loser and shit, right? Man, what a moron. It's like there's that movie called, I think it's Half Baked. It's the one Half Baked, and then, he's got to stop smoking weed for the Mary Jane girlfriend. It's the black comedian that's super, Dave Chappelle, I think it is, Dave Chappelle. He's going to stop smoking weed, so he goes to a rehab place. No, it's not a rehab place, but it's like an AA meeting type of thing, right? And he's in there, and there's all these drug addicts talking about all the crazy shit they've done for drugs and shit, right? And he gets up there and he says, I'm a weed addict, right? And they're like, weed? What are you talking about? That ain't shit. They're like, what are you talking about? Weed? What the fuck, right? And then so he's like, yeah, I got a problem with weed. And they're just laughing at him because they're real drug addicts and shit, right? So they're just laughing at him. And then they go, yeah, you ever suck dick for weed? And he says, no, I never did that. And then they said, get out of here, get out of here. So that's how it is. It's like, Dustin, you just wouldn't fit in and shit, dude. You wouldn't fit into the group. You haven't had the experiences, and the people that have had the experiences would just instantly call you out and expose you as the fraud little mama's boy, isolated fucking bitch you were that didn't have any friends, so you're inside playing with your fucking games and shit all day, and that's your whole world of what you've got to talk about. Was your big problem of the day was your mama forgot to buy you some goddamn Fruit Loops and shit, right? And that was your big problem of the fucking day and shit, right? You don't got the fucking life stories and life experiences to stand up here on YouTube and have a television show and portray yourself as some kind of voice and reason for the community, because you have not had the life experiences to fucking relate to people like me. And then when I come in and tell you I got hardcore life experiences, which enables me to see things that morons like you can't see. And because of the life experiences I've had, I ended up making the discovery that Michael Jackson was actually the love child of Diana Ross and Smokey Robinson. I went and did the investigation. I got the hardcore evidence to back it up, but your mind is so fragile, you can't deal with it. Because when I come in and I start saying, look, I need you to actually think and actually use your mind, which you've never used your fucking mind. You're a trained monkey. They trained you how to do this job. They do it like this. Trained monkey, go over here, dance. Trained monkey, go over here and shake your ass. That's what you do. You're nothing. You're a fucking idiot. Any stupid trained monkey can do the work and the jobs of what you do. And you fucking prove it because you're not mentally capable of dealing with the reality of my fucking story. And you don't understand the importance of giving the quality information of what I've got. You don't understand the importance of giving that to the community, of which you're a fucking voice in that community. You don't understand shit, Dustin. You're a little fucking bitch. You never can hang out with the big boys. As soon as you come hang out with us, we break your fucking leg. You go run back home to mama like the little bitch you are. You never come out and play with the big boys again. So fuck you when you sit up here talking about your addiction shit. You're a fucking loser. Little bitch fucking Dustin crying about, oh my God, I had such a bad problem. I smoked 10 cigarettes a day. Oh, that's your big fucking problem? Fucking loser.